Hi, I'm Bill Arnold. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are many more podcasts available at myfaithradio.com. Your support makes this possible. Thank you. So we can start the show now. I just finished writing a book called I Don't Write Books. It's already done. I didn't write it.
Oh, don't you know, it's the Bill Arnold Show. It's Bill.
And a warm welcome to the Bill Arnold Show. I have to ask Wyatt, exactly what day is it, Wyatt?
Last time I checked, it was Wednesday, and I mean, sometimes I get them mixed up, but I'm pretty sure I'm right.
Yeah, well, summertime does have a way of doing that. One day can kind of blend into the other. But I noticed that Greg Bourgond's in the studio, and usually he's here on Thursday.
Oh, so you had a moment of panic.
Do you know what he's doing here?
Well, yeah, I do. He has this book, and I think he's going to tell us about it today, right?
Okay. All right. It must be the book called The Winter of Your Life. If you're not dead, you're not done. Now, the winter season, it's not a period of decline or loss or irrelevance, but it's that transformative season that is absolutely full of potential and purpose and legacy and divine calling. That is our topic today, and Dr. Greg Bourgond is here with me in studio, and we want to celebrate the arrival of your new book, The Winter of Your Life. If you're not dead, you're not done.
Well, thank you, Bill. I appreciate it.
So you were telling me before the show started that you didn't want to write this book. What's up with that?
I figured that my last book was going to be Leadership Beef Jerky. I've never written a book just to write a book or to sell copies for it.
Good.
And so I figured, that it was my fourth book, Leadership Beef Jerky, and I thought that was it. But it was through the urging of a friend in a conversation I had with him, actually is the contributing author to the book, Russ Ullman, who I've known for years. And we were in a conversation, and I mentioned I'm in the winter of my life, and I went on to explain or to talk some more, and he says, stop, wait a minute, explain what you mean by the winter of your life, and what are you doing in the winter of your life? So I started telling him, he says, Greg, you got to write a book about that. And so, I tucked it away and met with some other people and talked to them about it, and finally was convinced, well, maybe God's laying on my heart to write this book, because we are called to facilitate God's redemptive purposes in a fallen world. And it doesn't stop when we hit 60. It stops when God calls us home. I remember a conversation I had with a friend who was the president of a denomination and visited us in Ireland. And, Bill, we go to Ireland often. And we were sitting outside at the picnic table, and he had just so-called retired. And he says, Greg, it's like somebody threw a switch. I'm not called anymore. At the time of my life when I have the most to offer, all of the experiences I've had and the gifting God's given me and the calling he's given me, nobody's asking for it. And I remember him saying that. And so when I had this conversation with Russ, I recalled that in my mind. And I said, well, my mentor, Bobby Clinton, talks about double confirmation. When you hear something from two different sources about the same subject, you probably ought to listen to it. It just might be from the Lord. So I started listening to it. And so I felt convicted to go ahead and begin the book. And boy, when I started writing, Bill, I just couldn't stop. I wrote 18 chapters in 18 days.
Wow. All right. Let's just start with talking about the metaphor of the four seasons, because I find this very interesting. Do you want to go ahead and talk about?
Sure. When we talk about the four seasons, the first season, of course, is the spring of your life. That's probably starting with mid-school, where you're starting to learn a little bit more about yourself, extends into high school and potentially college or trade school, where you're kind of figuring out what you want to do in life. And not only what you want to do in life, but who you are.
Good point.
So that's the spring of your life. And so you're just kind of finding that shape of what God's made of you and what he expects of you. Then you move into the summer of your life, where you're establishing your career, you're establishing a family, you're moving ahead with the plans that capitalize on maybe your education or your experience, and so you're just really getting established. So that's the summer of your life. And the fall of your life is after you've got that established and you find out what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you love to do, what you have to do to do what you love to do. You start narrowing your focus, and it's no longer about getting established. It's about leveraging who you are. And that's a rich time in your life. So that's the fall of your life. And then you move into the winter of your life, sometimes planned, sometimes unplanned. Sometimes you're pushed into the winter of your life by a downsizing of a company that you're working with or the end of a job, or it might be for a health reason. And you may not have anticipated so-called retiring at that point. But then there are others who have really planned during this period in their 60s that they're just going to move into a more leisurely pace for their life. And oftentimes, regardless of what brought you to that point in your life, whatever you planned to do seemed really exciting at the moment that you planned it. For instance, well, I'm going to travel more. Well, pretty soon you end up traveling to all the places you wanted to travel to and you're done. Or, you know what, I'm really going to improve my handicap in my golf game. Well, that's expensive and it gets boring after a while, and you realize the handicap isn't going down, it's going up because you're not physically able to go ahead and keep it up. I'm going to spend more time with my grandkids, which is a wonderful thing, except they have their own lives now. They have their own families, and they can't wait for Grandpa to go home.
Right.
Glad you visited, Grandpa, but it's time to go home. And so, but then the sad part also is that people, when they're working, get a sense of identity by what they do. And when what they do is taken away from them or is no longer available, they don't know who they are because they got their identity by what they did. So they enter this phase called the winter of your life in a quandary of trying to figure out, what am I going to do with my time? And often leads to depression or despair or disappointment, and sometimes even leads to dysfunctional or destructive behavior that can actually shorten your life because they lost all sense of who they are. But the winter of your life should be the most exciting time in your life because you get to do the things you love to do. You get to do the things God's called you to do. You get to do the things that you're equipped to do. And so you make choices. And so in the winter of my life, in the testimonies you'll read in the book, there are 19 of them in one chapter of people who are making a difference in the winter of their life, is that it just moves from shotgun to laser beam. But it's always with the objective of having eternal significance, making a difference in our world, leaving a legacy and living a legacy worth leaving in the lives of others for the sake of the kingdom. And so we end up jettisoning those things we had to do what we love to do and focusing on those things we love to do. And the interesting thing is we're often busier during the repurposing, I'd rather call retirement repurposing of our life than we were before, because somebody else's agenda we had to comply with, but now this is our agenda and our making. So it can be the most powerful, the most meaningful, the most life-giving time of your life.
So we don't have to go too far into the book of Genesis to see that there was Abraham being called into God's plan for his life, and he was not a young man.
No, he wasn't. Same thing with Moses.
Yeah, exactly.
Same thing with many of the leaders in the Bible. You know, our culture, Bill, diminishes the importance of seniors. And what's interesting is that the population, the senior population in the world is growing dramatically, disproportionate to the general population. For instance, in the next 6 years, the general population of the world will grow by about maybe 4.5% to 5%. People who are 60 or older, that particular group, are growing 25 to 27% in those 6 years.
I did not know that.
So even in the United States, it's growing even more rapidly. And so what do you do with those years? What brings this about? Well, first of all, fertility rate is dropping, and longevity, our lifespan, is increasing. So we may have more time in our retirement years, or so-called repurposing years, or the winter of our life, than we had previously in maybe the other seasons of our life. So that population is growing. The other thing that drives me about this issue is I've never lost the view, the clarity that I'm going to appear as every one of us as Christians before the judgment seat of Christ. It says in Romans 14:12 that we're going to give an account for what we've been given.
Mm-hmm.
And it also says in Ephesians 2:10 that God has designed us for a unique purpose that he prepared in advance for us to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that he's wired us in a certain way to facilitate his redemptive purposes in a fallen world. And Scripture is replete with all kinds of verses that talk about that obligation. Matthew 28:19 and 20, about making disciples, that we're called to do that. So what drives me is to know that God is expecting an ROI at the judgment seat of Christ. All Christians appear before the judgment seat of Christ, not for condemnation, but for commendation.
Not everybody knows what an ROI is.
Return on investment. God has given us certain skills and abilities, natural talents, things we've learned along the way, experiences and opportunities for a reason. And we're to focus that on facilitating his redemptive purposes in a fallen world. So when we appear before the judgment seat of Christ, we're going to give an account for what we have done with what we have been given. And actually, the rewards that we receive will be dependent upon our faithfulness in fulfilling that requirement. So that drives me. And so the whole idea about making a difference in the world and living a legacy worth leaving and leaving a pleasing aroma in the lives of others is so important. And it's not just about us. It's not about us at all in many respects. It's about what God had planned for us. That for some unfathomable reason, infinite God has chosen you and I to carry out his redemptive purposes in a fallen world. He's called us ministers of reconciliation in 1 Corinthians. We're to minister on his behalf until we are called home.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Greg Bourgond is my guest. We're talking about his new book, The Winter of Your Life. If you're not dead, you're not done. And so I have a little inside information about you, Greg. And I know personally that you actually love winter.
I
Your
do.
favorite season, you crazy person.
Yeah, well, my wife thinks I need counseling.
I agree with her.
She grew up in Florida, and I grew up in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and we had 120 and 160 inches of snow. But winter for me as a kid was fantasy. I mean, we had this vacant lot right next to our house where we'd always put in an ice rink.
Nice.
And I was the fool that always played the goalie.
Okay.
So we'd take this rubber ball and we'd soak it in water and we'd cut off the top and the bottom. That was our puck. It was an ice puck. And as a goalie, I'd have a pillow with a rope tied around me with a hockey stick. And I was the fool that, with no headgear or anything, sit in the net. And we'd play for hours outside. I'm surprised I still have all my teeth. But I just loved winter. I loved seeing the snowflakes through the lights, the lights on the street, and I just absolutely loved it. And first of all, living in Sault Ste. Marie, we only knew there was one sport, and that's hockey.
Right.
All the rest are pretenders. But anyway, I just absolutely loved the winter. So I don't see it as a depressing time.
I know you don't.
And that's one of the reasons we're still here in Minnesota, because of the four seasons. And if I had my druthers, I'd either be living up north or in Ireland. Mm-hmm. But I really do love the winter.
What about overcoming your fear of aging? Did you have a fear of aging, and have you overcome it?
Well, that's a great question, and that may be the question that many of our listeners might be thinking themselves. I mean, it is a fearful thing because you don't see as well as you used to. Your reflexes aren't as sharp as they used to be. And you may be encumbered with some disability that happened to you along the way. And you wonder if you're just going to be existing and not living in the last days of your life. Mm-hmm. And is it going to be a painful process? It takes a shift in your mind to think about, regardless of where you're currently at right now, you may be incapacitated, you may have a disability, but God's still not finished with you yet, that there are things that you can be doing, even in the midst of your turmoil, to do what he's called us to do, was to carry out his redemptive purposes. So I no longer fear it. I know it's coming. I have less years in front of me than I now have behind me, but I'm going to make the most of them. I say to men all the time in my ministry, Heart of a Warrior, that I'm going to crash through the gates of heaven, utterly exhausted, having expended everything on the field of engagement. And my wife, who's always the realist, says, yeah, there's going to be 2 or 3 angels exhausted too. I'm glad you're home. But that's the way that I feel. So I'm going to give everything I can to the last breath in me. And it's not because I want rewards. It's not because I feel that I'm obligated. It's because I'm pulled to a sense of destiny. I'm not pulled to it by a sense of obligation. So I see the destiny in front of me, and as long as God can use me, I'm going to parlay everything that I am to carry out that plan.
With the eternal perspective, and what impact can I have the remaining days of my life?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't care if I'm remembered. I don't care if people know about my life. What I care about is whoever I've invested in, what is the direct influence that God permitted me to have in somebody's life, the indirect influence, the organizational influence. I want that to outlive me because I want it to be a pleasing aroma. I want people to have been better off having at least walked with me for a short distance in their life. And so I'm dedicated completely to that. And it gives me life. I benefit from it, even though it's not my primary objective. Mm-hmm. It's not about Bourgond. I benefit from it. I just feel so complete and so full of life doing that. It's not because it's easy either, but it's because I know I'm called to do it. Mm-hmm. And I'm fulfilling God's command for my life.
All right. Greg, nice start to this time together. We're going to continue our discussion with Dr. Greg Bourgond. His brand new book is called The Winter of Your Life. If you're not dead, you're not done. We'll take a break and just be right back. You might be the kind of person that goes to Paris and still listens to Faith Radio on the app. And I'm thinking of a particular couple from northern Minnesota. Or you might be more like the person that just goes into the next room in your apartment and listens. Well, the good news is using the app is just as easy in both places. Downloading the free app is crazy easy. Just text the word app to 877-933-2484 and then click the link. And if you happen to be in Paris, there is a coffee shop, but you should see the prices of biscotti. They have gone through the roof. I recommend avoiding it. I'm back with Dr. Greg Bourgond, his brand new book, The Winter of Your Life. If you're not dead, you're not done. And this book really wants to engage you in your later years to really a brand new, renewed sense of divine calling and purpose. It seeks to ignite passion for investing in God-ordained opportunities. And it's a powerful book. And Greg, let's talk about some of the topical outline of the chapters. You've got it divided very creatively into 3 parts, and I would love to go through each one of these, if you don't mind.
Sure, not a problem. The first part of the book is called Now What? That part of the book is about evaluation and thinking through what's happened to you by what you perceive at the moment might be chance or happenstance, but certainly didn't escape God's purview. And things you also planned, so planned and unplanned events, and the shaping that took place, the positive things that happened to you, maybe some of the negative things that happened to you. So the book itself, in that first section of Now What, addresses current realities, for instance, of entering or living in the winter season. Topics that are included are confronting societal views of aging, for instance, personal fears and transitions, spiritual realities of later life and the four-season metaphor for understanding one's journey. It sets the foundation by reorienting whoever's reading this book, their perspective towards purpose rather than loss. And so, I teach 8th graders, and they're in the spring of their life. I actually dedicated this book to my 8th grade students at Liberty Classical Academy because their future is in front of them. And so the book isn't just for people who are entering the winter of their life. It's helpful to those, whatever season they're in, to prepare for that eventuality instead of stumbling into it and happening into it, if you will. But the first part of the book, there are several chapters associated with covering those topics, and it answers the question, now what? I mean, isn't that the first question you ask? And let's say that the first day of retirement, and you sit back when you have a moment of reflection and say, now what?
I've heard that many, many times from friends and people that say, I don't know what my purpose is right now.
Yeah. And so it's a time of real self-evaluation. It's probably one of the few times you're really honest with yourself. And because there's nobody conditioning your thoughts or the way in which you look at things. And so you're pretty brutal with yourself during that phase. And it's probably a good thing because you always want to start from a basis of reality, not perceptions about reality. Mm-hmm. The second part, did you want to just walk through each of those parts? Or?
I want to talk a little bit more about now what, because that is that phase in life where you start to scratch your head. And I think you built a framework called work, family, community, and then some of that your kids have grown up, you've left your job. So that framework doesn't work for you anymore.
No.
So you have to build a new framework. You got to start putting up more scaffolding. You have to start figuring out how to live in this new environment.
Yeah, it may not just take renovation. It may take additions.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, when you do this evaluation, you think about, what? There was a time in my life when I really wanted to learn about this, or I wanted to develop this competency or this skill, and I never got around to it. You know what? Now I got the time. I'm going to go back to school, or I'm going to go to a conference, or I'm going to ask somebody I know is good in this area to mentor me. So I'm going to fill in the holes. I don't know what God has in front of me, but I'm going to go ahead and work with my portfolio and prepare the best I can in anticipation of what God may have in front of me. Mm-hmm. And so that's the now what stage. The topics are interesting. I mean, it walks you through life is fleeting, the landscape, talks even about warfare of another kind, the fact that you are going to be experiencing spiritual warfare. I mean, if you are bent and focused on facilitating God's redemptive purposes in a fallen world, you think the enemy's not going to take notice of that? And so he may target you. And rather than seeing it as something to be feared, wear it as a badge of honor because he never attacks somebody he's not afraid of.
That's true.
So, and then God's development plan, how does God develop us? How to finish well is in that section. Personal priorities. The phrase, if you're not dead, you're not done, is not original with me. It was an original quote from Craig Rochelle. Mm-hmm. It was so captivating to me as I was writing the book to think about, it's true. If you're not dead, you're not done. Shaping events and then finding margin in your life. Because up till the point where you now have some time, you probably had very little margin in your life. Margin is the distance between your load and your limits. And most of us, when we're working, live in a herniated environment where there is no room. So every time an opportunity comes, or God may lay out in front of us an opportunity, we don't see it as something to celebrate. We see it as something more we have to do. If that's your attitude when God opens up the opportunity, you're living in a herniated disc environment. There's no margin in your life. But now you can build margin because some of the things that took up that margin are no longer available to you. Mm-hmm. You've left those behind. The goal is not to fill it too quickly so that you have room to hear God's still small voice about how you live out the winter of your life. So that's all in that first section.
Mm-hmm. And when you start this winter of your life, Greg, I would imagine that you are encouraging people to have a blend of ministry, relaxation, enjoyment, all of this, right?
Oh, all of it.
Okay, good.
A friend of mine talked about the barrel exercise. And in the barrel exercise, he says, we all have a limited amount of physical, emotional, and spiritual energy to expend at any given time. And we have obligations and responsibilities, so the throughput of that fluid is rapid. Some of them are dysfunctional things we need to plug up. But the idea is to refill whatever's been drained out, legitimately or otherwise. And so one of the things in the winter of my life, I learned how to cook. I learned how to cook because I wanted to please my family. I wanted to share meals with them because I got great joy out of watching them enjoy a meal I prepared for them. Going to Ireland, for instance, just brings life to me. So that fills my barrel. So you're absolutely right. It isn't all about just ministry, because all of us need to develop a spiritual rhythm, which includes rest, includes some things we really enjoy, to give us the energy to do what God's called us to do that's in front of us. So you're absolutely right, Bill. It's a combination of those things.
Okay, good. All right. Anything else in the now what department?
No, other than just don't be afraid to evaluate. Don't be afraid to do an honest reflection. Don't be afraid to talk to your friends who know you the best and say, you've been with me for a long time. We've been friends for a long time. What do you see as my strengths, my limitations, and my weaknesses? What do you think I have to offer at this stage in my life? Get that honest feedback from people that matter in your life, your spouse or relative or a friend you've had for a number of years that knows you quite well and will speak to you honestly.
They might start with an invitation for you to mentor someone that they know that you'd be perfect to mentor them.
Yeah, exactly.
You could have a discipleship opportunity open up instantly. I think it's a great thing to do, Greg, is just to open it up to your friends and say, what do you see? What are my strengths? What could you imagine me doing?
Is there somebody in your sphere of influence that I might be of assistance to or help?
Yeah. All right. I think we'll take a break and then come back, and then we'll go to the part two. Part one was now what, and part two is then what. So you'll have to explain that when we come back from the break.
Sure
Does
will.
that work?
Yep.
Dr. Greg Bourgond is my guest, and we're talking about his new book, The Winter of Your Life. If you're not dead, you're not done. If you have a question or comment, already had a nice comment here on the text line here, Greg. Great topic. In my late 70s, but had some seminary credits when I was younger. Thinking about taking some more classes at a seminary to pursue a topic I'm interested in.
That's excellent.
Isn't that exactly what we're looking for?
Exactly right.
All right. If you have a question or comment, the text line is open, 877-933-2484. Be right back. The Winter of Your Life. If you're not dead, you're not done. That's the title of Dr. Greg Bourgond's latest book, of which he's written several. And he loves winter. He loves this season of his life. And he's just helping all of us be much more focused and intentional. So we're going through the outline of some of the chapters. And part one is called Now What? And it's really helping navigate cultural and spiritual realities. Now we're going to move on to then what? What does that mean, Greg?
Yeah, it's about succession planning and passing on wisdom. That whole section focuses on forward-looking preparation, for instance. This part, it kind of explores practical succession planning. I mean, what do you pass on to others that matter in your life? Mm-hmm. What baton are you going to give them so that they can carry on the race? So it includes identifying what to pass on. For instance, it might be wisdom, it might be faith, it could be values, it could be experiences. That's strategies for mentoring the next generation. That's in the then what category. Building relational and spiritual legacies and aligning personal plans with God's broader purposes for an ongoing impact. So that's all about it. And this section was primarily written by my co-author, Russ Ullman. He was in charge of 6 campuses of Lake Point Church in Houston, Texas, and had a ministry called Ministry Advantage, and now is starting a new 501c3 called Succession Planning. In this case, helping senior pastors pass on to worthy successors.
Oh, wow.
What they have done and what God's called them to do. But succession planning is also about passing on things like from a teacher to a student. It could be from a father to a son or a daughter. It could be a grandparent to a grandchild. It could be a lot of things, but it's getting a grasp on what of merit has happened in my life that God has brought into my life that will benefit somebody else, and how can I pass that on? So that's the whole issue about then what? Because it's a shame that many people go to their grave never having passed on what they've learned. I'm all about keeping journals. And a journal is different than a diary. It's the insights you're given over time. And so you can pass it on to your children. Every book I've written, Bill, I've had in my mind, I don't want to pass on to be with the Lord and have my grandchildren or people who matter in my life wonder what I believed and how I lived my life.
Good point.
In hopes that there be something of value. Not everything in my life is of value. Some things I don't want to pass on. But to have them understand truly what made me who I was and God being the source. Focus again not on me, but on what he's done in and through me that I can pass on to them. Mm-hmm. So that's what this section is about. Some of the titles, for instance, are When the Applause Ends. I think that's a great title, or fades. Types of Succession, Identity Beyond the Title, Letting Go Well, Still Called, Stewardship with What Remains, A Fruitful Final Fourth, and Finishing Strong. So those are the chapter titles in this section, and I think it would be very helpful to people. Mm-hmm. One of the values I think of this book, Bill, is it isn't just talking about what should be or what we ought to be doing. It's very practically oriented, especially in this last section, but we'll get to that.
So help us with some practical application. You've spoken about wanting to pass on some things that you believe, and how do you apply this? How do you sit your grandkids down and have them have them really want to listen to what Grandpa's saying? Well,
what my grandchildren will say to you is, and what I say to men regularly, nobody cares what you have to say until they observe how you live. And if you live a life of integrity and honor under God's authority, people will ultimately want to hear what you have to say, even if they disagree with you. Why? Because they can't get past a life well lived. So we're being observed all the time, the good and the bad. And I seize every opportunity for a teachable moment with people that matter in my life. It's not only my grandchildren, it's their friends who come over now without my grandchildren even being there. We might be watching a hockey game together, but a spiritual conversation will start, or they'll ask my advice. Because one of the disciplines I've developed in my life is to only answer the question somebody is asking, and no more. That way, they are not going to feel like I'm going to regurgitate everything I know at the first open door I get.
Right.
And they'll come back. They may have a surface question initially, but if I only answer that question, they'll come back with a level 2 question later, maybe a level 3 question, and we'll explore that. So it's with that discipline. But there's more intentional ways to pass on. For instance, all of the journeys that I have in Heart of a Warrior, Ground Zero, which is foundations, Phase 1, the compass, Phase 2, the map, and Phase 3, the guide, are opportunities for me to pass on to people who are sitting in those groups what God has taught me and what I've learned and what I can share with them. I mentor men and women. Mm-hmm. I actually am asked to mentor a lot of people. A lot of them I turn down because I just don't have the time, and I try to be selective and pray for discernment for God who to invest in. And so I think what I present or try to present to the Lord, which opens up these opportunities, is my fatness. Now, what do I mean by that? Being a fat Christian, what I try to be is faithful, available, and teachable. I have insatiable curiosity.
I know you do.
I'm learning all the time. I'm never satisfied with what I know. I know I can learn better because my goal is not to get smarter. My goal is to have something of value to pass on to somebody that God may bring to me, which you don't always plan. It could be over a coffee. Mm-hmm. It could be officiating at somebody's wedding, which happened here recently, premarital counseling that I do. And so it's not a matter of planning out on a table, well, here's the 12 things I'm going to do to apply what I've learned. God just fills the void. Mm-hmm. It's the margin.
Yeah. I sometimes am reluctant to mention something to you in passing because I can have a theological thought or something that I mentioned to you casually, and then later that night at about 10:30, I'll get a 6-page email because you couldn't shut it off.
No,
because of your curiosity.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is what I love about you, Greg. But you've got an insatiable appetite for curiosity.
Well, one of my mentor again, J. Robert Clinton, he'd study the lives of historical, biblical, and Christian leaders to determine how they finished. And those that finished well, one of their qualities was they were lifelong learners.
Mm-hmm.
And you never arrive. We're all in the process of becoming, yet not having arrived. There's always something new to learn, to pass on. But it isn't just for your own self-edification. I mean, it may be part of it because you're going to go to the subjects that you're interested in. But I'm always thinking about, okay, how can I turn this into a story or a allegory or something that will be helpful? Like I write newsletters, Heart of Warrior newsletters, generally every month that I send out to subscribers. And it's these kinds of thoughts, passing these things on. Because it's being part of the fellowship of the sponge. And what I mean by that is that you can't, you can't take any more in than is possible given the size of your sponge. I mean, you pour water into a sponge, gets saturated, and then it's wasted on the side. So how do you make room for more water? Well, you wring it out into somebody else's life so that God can fill it up again so you can wring it out. So developing the spiritual rhythm to me is filling up and wringing out. Filling up and wringing out. And I enjoy doing that. And maybe I'm wired weirdly, I don't know, but I think there are a lot of people like me. But that's what I want to do is I want to be constantly learning to pass on to others something of value that can help their life.
I like this comment that came in on the text line, Greg. Appreciate the conversation, guys. It's insightful and encouraging. At 58 years old, I'm still going strong. Glory to God, and looking forward to however much time I have left on earth.
Bless you.
Isn't that beautiful?
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Welcome to the fellowship of never giving up.
Yes, and you're kingdom-minded and focused, and we don't know how much time we have.
No.
We have no guarantees in that department.
Live every day to the fullest. I mean, the opportunities will come your way if you're just open for them. And if you're faithful, available, and teachable, God will give you opportunities you haven't even thought of. People will come to you that you don't even know. And so just be available, faithful, and teachable.
All right. Part 1 is now what? Part 2 is then what? Part 3 is so what? Let's move on to that.
All right. Part 3 is the really practical part of the book in the sense that it offers guidelines on how to prepare for the winter of your life. And it gives practical examples of impactful legacies. For instance, one chapter alone has 19 different testimonies of individuals at different walks in life who are facilitating God's redemptive purposes, as we've talked about, in the latter stage of their life in meaningful ways that bring significance.
Can you tease us with one?
Sure. For instance, Paul Olson used to play for the Chicago Bears, very successful businessman, and now is investing in young leaders at a university, Christian leaders, young men from different countries, and investing in them. He has a website, Legacy, that helps you assess where you are and what you need to do to prepare for whatever God may have in front of you. And he's always mentoring people all the time. And, his knees bother him a little right now because of being in the professional football league for so many years. But he is making a difference. His testimony is in that book. And there are many others, and some that are not as glamorous, but are making an impact. And so 19 of them are in there, men and women who are making a difference in the last quarter of their life.
Beautiful.
Also in this chapter, besides the chapter on 19 testimonies, this is where we get really, really practical. For instance, let me give you an idea of some of the topics here. It starts off with a wide awake dream, and it's a dream that I had after a terrible disappointment, and partly because of betrayal, and wondering what in the world happened. What was God doing? And so it's about appearing before, in this line, and people who didn't look like us on either side, just listening to our conversation as we're proceeding forward to a place we couldn't see ahead of us. And they were actually angels that would engage us in conversation. And where we were headed was the judgment seat of Christ. And at the end of that dream, it was like God was saying to me, Greg, I'm not done with you yet.
Mm-hmm.
It's time for you to go back. I have other things planned for you. So that's the wide awake dream, making an impact. Our calling, we're all called. It's not just people who go to seminary. We all have a calling. That's what Ephesians 2:10 and many other passages are about. God prepared a purpose for our life, a unique purpose for our life based on our wiring. What aroma will you leave? And then this chapter 23 is preparing for winter. What do you do to prepare for the winter of your life? The next chapter is finding your winter footing. And then finally, testimonies of winter people. And then when all is said and done. But there's a step-by-step process in the book. And in the appendices, there are instruments that you can take to help assess where you're currently at and where you need to be. How can you come to clarity about your wiring? There's an instrument in there in the appendices. And so it's all about how do you activate that? How do you put it into action? So this last section, the so what do you do with what you've learned in the first one? Now what? And what have you learned from then what? And what is the so what of your life? So that's what this last section is about. So it's very practical. Many books written, like, for instance, Bob Buford wrote the book Second Half. And it was a wonderful book. But the only criticism I had with it is I didn't get any clear direction of what to do with what he was telling me. And most of the books that talk about this are reminiscing or they're memoirs. I didn't want this book to be that. I wanted it to be a book that was practical and helpful to people to move from shotgun to laser beam in the winter of their life based on who God wired them to be and the calling on their life. So there's a lot of practical help in this last section of the book.
I like practical help. I'm a big fan of that. We're going to take a break and come right back with Dr. Greg Bourgond, his new book, The Winter of Your Life. If you're not dead, you're not done. Be right back. Hi, podcast listener. You know, I'm Bill Arnold, and my theme song says, "What's for dinner?" And like when I'm grilling, I'm paying really close attention. And I know that ideal second to get the food off the grill. Like all good and ideal timings in life, right now would be an ideal time to be a cheerful giver to Faith Radio. Give now to support this podcast so that more people in more places might come to saving faith in Jesus and grow in their relationship and become a fully devoted follower. Click the link in the show notes or give now at myfaithradio.com. So glad to be with Dr. Greg Bourgond, and it's not even Thursday, but he'll be here tomorrow for Guy Talk, or Guys Who Talk. But he's written a brand new book called The Winter of Your Life. If you're not dead, you're not done. And this has been very encouraging. The outline of the chapters are now what, then what, so what. So, Greg, let's talk about preparing for the winter of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the preparation, there are several suggestions that I give people in terms of, making that preparation. It's actually in chapter 23 of the book. And so let me just walk through a couple of the steps, for instance. The first one is to seek God's counsel.
Amen.
You shouldn't start any process without seeking God's counsel first. And that means prayer and reflection. It may mean going away for a couple of days just to hear God's still small voice. And oh, by the way, the reason he speaks so profoundly in a still small voice is it forces us to lean forward to hear it. So we need to lean forward to hear what God through the Holy Spirit says to us. So first of all, seek God's counsel. The second thing that I would encourage is to consult trusted observers. People maybe that are already in the winter of their life and are making a difference for the kingdom. How did they get there? What what did they do to prepare themselves? So it's about consulting trusted observers. The third is assessing your spiritual well-being. Where you're at spiritually matters because who you are spiritually always inform what you do. As we've said earlier, it's not what you do that determines who you are. It's who you are in Christ that determines the quality of what you do. And sometimes we've got holes in our soul that need to be filled. Sometimes we have sin that needs to be confessed. Sometimes we have people in our lives that need to be forgiven. And sometimes there's attitudes that we have that may need to be changed. So assessing your spiritual well-being. As a matter of fact, one of the appendices is all about doing that assessing of your spiritual well-being. The next is evaluate your portfolio. What do you have to offer? Not just the schooling that you may have had or the conferences you went to or the workshops you attended, but it's the experiences you had, the encounters you had, the people you met along the way.
The storms you've weathered.
Yeah, the storms
That's
you've
a big
weathered, the
deal.
lessons you've learned, the crises that you've had to navigate.
Amen.
Whether you failed them or not, we learn a lot from our failures. So evaluating your portfolio for the purpose of filling in the blanks in preparation for what may God have for you, or what God may have for you in the
And Greg,
future.
when you talk about portfolio, you're not saying financial. You're just saying your body of experience.
Yeah, I'm talking about what are your strengths?
Yep.
What are your limitations? What are your weaknesses? And so what's your unrealized potential? What can you learn from your current involvement? That's kind of assessing your portfolio. The next step is to conduct a giftedness audit. And what I mean by that is determining what your spiritual gifts are. Now, spiritual gifts are different than talents. All of us are born with a certain number of talents. Some of them are unrealized. Some of them are buried so far into our subconscious, we've never actualized them. But we have certain talents and abilities that God has given us at our birth. But a spiritual gift is different from a talent in that it's given for the benefit of others, and it'll always produce a spiritual result. So it's not a matter of just taking an inventory. Inventories might give you an inclination of what your gift might be, but the only way you ever find out if it's a spiritual gift is seeking out venues in which to express that gift and see what God does with it. That'll be proof perfect whether or not you have that spiritual gift. So the step is, what spiritual gifts do you have to offer in the last season of your life? And so what are the acquired competencies and skills that you possess? What have you achieved so far in your life? Another step in preparing is determine your God-given destiny. So one of the appendices in the book is called Developing Your Personal Life Mandate. That has to do with your biblical purpose, your life purpose, your committed passion, your non-negotiables, your toolkit, and a sense of your ultimate contribution or contributions. So what is your God-given destiny? What do you see on the horizon that you're being drawn to? You're never pushed to your destiny by a sense of obligation. You're pulled to your destiny by a sense of calling. So what is that calling? Indirect destiny processing, all of that. And then research and investigate possible opportunities. I give a whole list of possible avenues that you can seek out to express who you are. And they're in the area here, so you'll have plenty of opportunities to do it. But you need to research and investigate the possible opportunities. I wouldn't do that too early, because oftentimes when you do the assessment and you take a look at how you've lived your life, it may open up areas you would have never considered before. Mm-hmm. Things that you would have never entertained or even contemplated doing. But now that you're open to God's leading and shaping in your life, He may take you to a destination that doesn't even exist yet. He may be preparing you for that, in other words.
I like that.
And so it's all about the preparation. So research and investigate possible opportunities. Then prepare a plan, a workable, executable plan. And then the last step is execute the plan.
There you go.
Don't leave it on the shelf.
Right.
Nice, written up in different font and all of the rest of it.
Color-coded.
Color-coded.
Go out and do it.
Yes. Just do it. One
like it.
step at a time.
I like it. Greg, thank you so much for coming in. I will see you tomorrow.
Yes.
But my guest today has been Dr. Greg Bourgond. His brand new book is called The Winter of Your Life. If you're not dead, you're not done. We're going to take a break, and Wyatt, I think you and I need to process this a little bit.
A lot of good knowledge, and we should talk about it some more, I think.
Yeah, let's, after the break, talk about this a little bit more. I mean, how do we best prepare to be prepared for the winter of your life? So again, Greg's book is called The Winter of Your Life. If you're not dead, you're not done. He says it's not only on Amazon, but it's in Target and Walmart and everywhere else. So should be not too hard to get a copy of it. Thank you very much, Greg, for being here. We're going to take a break and be right back. Thanks for listening. Programming like this is made available through your support. Information available at myfaithradio.com.